like I'm the sort of warm-up act today, really, because after I finish, a guy called Jason Perkins, I hope he's coming along, who's the head of data architecture for BT. He's a pretty senior guy, lucky to get him, really, and he'll tell you a bit about some of the challenges around architecture and governance in an organisation like BT. So what I was going to do is do a sort of warm-up session to talk about one of the things that I know he's going to talk about. It's this topic of governance, and very exciting title, What, Why, How. And governance sounds really boring, doesn't it? So what I'm going to try and do is make it a little more interesting, right? And tell you why I think governance is so important in the things that we're doing. I'm going to try and get this thing to click. That's a bit about me. Some of you may have noticed me hovering about, because I'm here quite a lot, because I'm working part-time at the moment with the NSA, with Matthew. I'm trying to set up a student company, so I'm looking into that. But I also do, the rest of my time, a data consultancy role within a small company called Global Data Strategy. And that's a bit about the background. If you want to talk to me about anything, my passion, apart from the NSA and data, is Cardiff City. So if anybody's a Cardiff City fan, plenty to talk about there. Okay, these are some of the companies that I've done the stuff I'm going to talk about with. The company I'm mainly working with at the moment is the Environment Agency, who are based in Bristol. They are taking governance of their data very seriously, because they are key to the government's open data strategy. Do you all know what open data is? Can I make that assumption? No? Well, open data is data that is released into the public domain free of charge for anybody to use. And the Environment Agency have got lots of data, and they've been under a lot of pressure to release a lot of their data into the public domain. So the people like you and people like me can look at it, mash it up with other data, and do things with it, particularly in the analytics sense. So I've been helping them look at governance of this data. Anyway, that's the agenda. I won't go through it. First of all, I'll start with what does governance mean. Then I'm going to talk about one area of governance, which is the area I know anything about, which is the governance of data, which I think is the fastest growing area of governance. It's also something that's driving a lot of change in organisations, and I think as well that all the lessons learned about governing data apply to governing anything in the areas that you're working in. Then I'll talk a little bit about what happens if you don't govern data very well, why does it go wrong, and then how governance can help improve data and create the change that's needed to put data at the centre of an organisation. I have come across hundreds of companies that say, we are data driven, we are a digital business, okay? And I guarantee you that most of them haven't got the foggiest idea how to manage data, which is their key asset in a digital business. So, relevant to the topic of this module, where you don't need a PhD to work out, I'm going to talk about governance, but this talk also touches on those other themes which are in this module as well. Things like risk management, quality management, project and program management as well, to just make you aware of that. What is governance? Right, okay, I went on Google last week and just came up with a few alternative definitions of governance. I'm not going to read all these through, mainly because we'll all fall asleep if I do. But what I'm going to ask you, to first bit of interaction, are there any keywords or phrases there that spring out at you when you think about what governance really is? Any words that spring out and think, what is governance all about? Sorry? One word is policies. What's a policy? Any idea? How would you define a policy?
Way that you do something.
It's the way you do something. It's a set of rules and a set of guidelines to guide how people should manage something in this context, yeah? Okay, policies. You've got anything else?
Manage.
Manage. There's something about managing things, yeah? Anything else? Sorry? Accountability. What does that mean? Yeah, which means, can you put it another way? Sorry?
Responsibility.
Yeah, so somebody takes responsibility for taking action and making something happen, yeah? And if something goes wrong, they're next on the line because they're the people responsible for it. Okay, any other keywords?
Power.
Power, yeah, so it's something about exercising power in an organisation.
So like a hierarchy of like management? So.
Yeah, there's some sort of implies, some of those definitions imply there's some sort of structure of management in there as well. So it's about structures, it's about, the other keyword I picked up was processes. There's something about processes. So those are the keywords I picked out, and I think you've got most of them. So when you talk about what governance is, forget all those very complicated, boring phrases. It's something to do with managing assets and resources in an organisation. It's something to do with setting policies, guidelines for how people do things. Then you've got to build some processes to enforce those policies. Then you need to monitor how people are behaving and how data is acting, for example, against those policies. You need to build some systems and some mechanisms to make it work and support it. You've then got to build, as point you made, something about organisational bodies or authorities. You've got to make people accountable for it, give them the power to make decisions, and the end goal of it all is to try and improve the business. So if I was put my own definition of governance together, it would be some sort of mashup of that lot in a form of words. So governance is all about those key things. And right, so in the world that you're in, applied software engineering, what sort of things do you think need that governance? Need those processes, need those policies in place?
How data
Any
is
thoughts?
stored and who can access it.
Okay, so thank you for mentioning data first, top of the class, yeah, because data is something people often forget about, but data is really important, and that's what I'll focus on afterwards. Anything else? What else needs to be governed, managed? Yeah, software, what exactly? Yeah, so the software development process itself, whether you're using Agile, Workforce, whatever you're using, there should be a set of rules, a set of processes behind how all that works, that people share so that they can work together on it. Anything else? Yeah?
What kind of damage it causes if it fails?
Okay, so there's something there about assessing the risk and managing the risks of things and continuity and the rest of it. Yeah, good. Anything else?
What about things like data protection?
Yeah, data protection certainly comes into sort of making sure that you're compliant with law and with regulation. Yeah, that's
You
really
just
important.
ring up a customer, you have to do that.
Correct.
Do you need their permission first?
Yeah, and I'll come back to that later because I'll talk a bit about regulation. Okay, so you've got a few things there. These are the things you've got good eyesight to see this. Some of the stuff I picked out was if you're working in the software engineering world, and I manage software engineers, and this is the list that I came up with. You've got to manage things like budgets. One of the worst failings of the software industry is that projects tend to overspend sometimes, and that can cause real issues for companies. Particularly a company like mine, because if we overspend, we can't charge a client for the work that we do. We've got to pay for ourselves, basically, and we can lose a lot of money that way. People and teams need to be governed. So if you're part of a software development team, then somehow that team needs to be managed. Systems need to be managed as well, particularly the sort of systems Jason's going to talk about, which are big enterprise-wide platforms and things that somebody should be responsible and accountable for. And so on. All right, I'm not going to go through all of these. A few others were mentioned. Security and access is another thing. Business continuity was mentioned, and risk management as well. And there's some stuff at the bottom there. I'm sure Fernando and Kath have already mentioned to you that you've got things like ITIL and COBIT and the rest of it. If you're interested in sort of data specifically, the DMBOK is a good place to start, which is a data management body of knowledge. So, I'm going to talk about the governance of data, and this is my definition of what data governance is all about. And we'll give you some examples in a second of what happens if you don't follow this. 3 key words or phrases in that definition, all right? And if you take the word data out of that and substitute security governance, risk governance, systems governance, pretty much the same thing, all right? So this would apply generically, I think. First thing about it, it's got to be a continuous process. Why do I say it has to be business-led and not led by the IT department? Any thoughts?
You need the whole company to adopt it rather than just expect IT to hold full responsibility.
Yeah, a big mistake lots of companies make is if you work in IT, they somehow think data is your responsibility. Or more to the point, when it goes wrong, guess whose fault it is? It's the IT department's fault. But it very rarely is the IT department's fault. Sometimes it is, but very often it isn't. So if you're a business, data is your business asset, like the people are. So the business has to take the lead in managing and governing data, okay? Second thing, it's all about improvement. There's no point in governing anything unless you're trying to improve it, whether it's the security of your systems, whether it's your development processes. You need to try and improve things all the time. And at the bottom of that, if you're going to improve things, you're going to be able to demonstrate that it's a good thing to do, that it benefits the company in some way. There's no point in doing any activity if at the end of the day the company's not going to be a better place than it was when you started. Okay, so who should be accountable for governing data?
Everyone.
Everyone? What do you mean everyone? Well, you're actually right to some extent. Yeah.
Responsibility.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point. I think every single person who works in any organisation has some responsibility for data. When you work in an organisation, if you send emails to people, and then somehow those emails come back to bite you, you're accountable for that. You're responsible for it. And there's a policy in your organisation about what you should and shouldn't do with that. So I agree with that. I think it's pretty much everybody, but you also need people to lead it. Because the problem with lots of companies, I've asked that question myself, who's responsible for governing data in your company? And they give you the same answer you just gave. Well, everybody is. Okay, so does that mean nobody really is, or that everybody is? Sometimes the answer is really nobody is. It's a get-out clause. So somebody must take the lead to make sure that everybody is responsible for the data that they manage. All right. So yeah, pretty accurate. And data governance is all about those 7 things. So I'm going to leave them there. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but it's something about the business must lead it. The business must set what the priorities are, and then you have to identify what your really important business data is, and then you make somebody the owners of it. So, who should be a natural owner, do you think, of a CRM, the data held in a CRM database? Who do you think owns that data on behalf of the company? Any thoughts? Anybody else?
What do you mean by CRM?
Oh, your CRM, customer relationship management, where you'd hold a lot of information about your customers, what they buy from you and that sort of thing. Yeah, the number of times you contact them. Who do you think in a company would logically be the owner of that?
Probably the sales department.
Yeah, either the sales or marketing department. So many companies, they'll say CRM data, really important, we get our customer data right. So the data owner of that should be the head of marketing or the head of sales. Yeah, that's one way of doing it. There are other ways of doing it. That's the most common way. But then, in order to improve the data owners are usually pretty important people, like heads of departments. They haven't got time to do this. So generally in data governance, people then appoint what they call data stewards. This is a term that's becoming more popular. A lot of jobs go in the way of data stewards these days. And their job is to do the day-to-day improvement of the data from the business side. And the role of IT is really in number 6, yeah? That IT's got a very important supporting role in all of this. If you work in IT departments, you could get involved in a data governance program, but you're not the ones accountable for it. It's the business at the end of the day who has to do it. And the point you made, the bottom point, is everybody in that organisation has a part to play. Why does everybody have a part to play?
Because a lot of people have to touch the data, even if they're not directly responsible.
Okay, so you can't, a data owner or a data steward doesn't create the data in the first place, right? So if somebody works at a contact centre and you ring them as a client and they ask you, can you give me a name and address? If they don't bother to record that accurately, it's not really the fault of the data owner, is it? It's their fault because they're the people who input it. And if they get it wrong, then that spreads throughout the whole organisation. And I'll talk about that in a minute as well. Right, so, wrong one. Right, next question then. Why bother to govern it? Well, what I'm going to do now is try and line you all up a bit and talk about the Chamber of Data Horrors. And I'm a bit sad, but I collect these stories, all right, about what happens when you don't govern data in an organisation. Right, exhibit 1, have you all heard of the TalkTalk data breach that happened? So, I don't need to say too much about this other than 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, 157,000 people had all their data nicked by scammers in India, all right, which included things like banking details, so that's really bad news, okay, for TalkTalk. First bit of bad news is that the Information Commissioner, who manages all data in the UK, recorded the biggest ever fine they've ever recorded, £400,000 on TalkTalk, but that was really just a sort of a drop in the ocean. And the comment there was made by the Information Commissioner could have been prevented if TalkTalk had taken basic steps to protect customer information. What that implied, and I've been to talk to TalkTalk before that, and I'm not surprised it happened. When I asked her that question, who's responsible for data in your organisation? Nobody agreed. And that's exactly why it went wrong. And the real cost was the bottom figure. That attack didn't cost them just £400,000 fine. They lost 100,000 customers, and that cost them 42 million quid. And today, TalkTalk hasn't got as many customers as it did before that happened. So it had a massive impact on the business. Right? So that's an example of the failure of governance of data, mainly security of data. Exhibit 2, this is one of my favourites. If you apply for jobs, somebody applied to us for a job, and this is what they wrote. Can anybody spot a problem with it?
They misspelled quality.
Yeah. They say that they are a manufacturing expert with 15 years of quality and engineering experience, but they didn't actually spell quality correctly. So it can affect whole companies, but it can also affect an individual. So lesson number one, when you apply for jobs, for God's sake, spell check it very carefully, because that's the sort of thing that made us look up, we went, oh, what a laugh, okay. That's what's known as shooting yourself in the foot if you're applying for a job. So it can affect individuals as well as companies, all right? Exhibit 3, this was a story you may or may not have heard about 3 years ago. What the NHS did was, many of them got friendly with insurance companies in Britain, and they decided to make a bit of money for the NHS, because we all know the NHS needs more money. So what they did was they decided to sell NHS records to insurance companies. Why would insurance companies want NHS records? What's in it for them? Yeah, so basically all your confidential details of when you went to a hospital, when you went to see a doctor. Now, why would that be of interest to insurance?
They make it sort of like weave or manufacturing cleans.
There's that, and the other thing, yeah.
If somebody tries to get themselves insured,
Yeah.
like life insurance, and they've got
Exactly.
like loads of heart attacks or something like that, so
Yeah.
they might drop dead soon.
Exactly, yeah. And health insurance as well, generally, you know, if you take a booper or something, health insurance, then they want to know. Now, of course, the NHS thought they weren't doing anything wrong, because they weren't stupid enough to sell all our patient details to these companies. So they made the great effort to anonymise the data sets. So they took everybody's name out, and they took their addresses out, and they sent the information, sold it to these insurance companies. Any thoughts that if you get enough of these data sets, guess what the insurance companies were able to do?
Work out who's who.
Sorry?
Work out who's who.
Work out who is who is exactly what they did. All they had to do was get a copy of the electoral register, a couple of other publicly available open data sets like that, link it up with the data they already had, and they could identify every single person that was released. That is against the law. The NHS were clobbered, basically. I won't go into how. Some people lost their jobs as a result of it, and it all happened because nobody owned those data sets. Yeah?
What part that was against the law, the NHS standing on, or the
The
reconstruction?
NHS was selling it to insurance companies.
Not the reconstruction.
No, they were actually selling the anonymised data to insurance companies. With little realising, insurance companies are talking to lots of different trusts, getting all this information in, mashing it all up, adding data to it, boom, out in the answer. So that was illegal, and a really bad example for the NHS, all caused by lack of ownership, accountability for who could sell it. If somebody had been accountable for this data sets, they would have said, no way you can have it, it's against the law. People didn't know. Right, better examples as well. This is a good one from the UK industry last year. You all heard of smart meters? Come across those, yeah? Really clever big pieces of technology, read your gas or electricity readings every 15 minutes. On average, if you take gas and electricity together, your average bill is 830 quid a year. But in March last year, made headline news, because when some people looked at their smart meters, can you see that? Anybody work out what the bill was on the left? Well, one person had a meter balance of 30,900 quid for a month's worth of gas and electricity, and the one on the right is even better, 393,022 pounds. So, what went wrong there, didn't it? Seems a bit much. I know it's been a cold winter, but it wasn't that bad.
So, software.
Well, basically, some of these meters weren't calibrated properly, and they were misreading by a factor of 10 or 20 the actual gas consumption. Yeah. My favourite comment from all this, made headline news in the papers. The energy companies concerned had a major embarrassment with this stuff, and the ICO, the Information Commissioner, ordered them to repay all the overpayments to customers. And can you imagine how complicated that would be for an energy company? To go back years and years and years since they've installed some of these, trying to figure out how much they owe people. And they had to pay every penny back. And my favourite quote was this one, which was in one of the national newspapers. I knew the prices had gone up, but that was a bit more than I expected, £300,000 a month. So, cause major, and of course the thing is, we can laugh at that, but some old people got that, and they basically shit scared. All right, that this was real. Many of them were really, really worried, and so it caused a lot of pain and anxiety. Right, next one. Here's one from 2016. Mobile workstation, very nice. How much would you pay for that thing? If you were going to buy it on Amazon.
1,500?
Yeah, 1,500 quid, something like that. Guess how much you could have got it for in 2016? Can you see that?
Oh,
Oh.
£1.58. Pretty good bargain, eh? That went on their website on a Saturday morning in the August Bank Holiday 2016. Anybody want to guess how many they sold?
Quite a lot.
I think it's safe to assume that, you know, if we'd seen that, some people ordered 200, as you can imagine. Probably going to put them on eBay afterwards. So the real price was about 2,300 quid actually, and they meant to be on sale at 1,580 quid. They missed a couple of zeros out, and guess what they blamed it on? A technical error. Right? But that's lack of basic governance of data. Any good system that you design that is a sales site like that should have basic checks built in to say, should we really be selling a laptop for £1.58? The answer is no. Very simple as that.
Did they actually send the laptops out?
No, good point. They then turned around and said, actually, this was a mistake, and we're not going to sell any of these laptops for £1.58. But what we are going to do is give all the customers who bought them 20% off the real price. A lot of customers are still suing them now, saying, that's the price you advertised. I signed up and I got a piece of paper to say that's what you sold me. So they're in legal dispute. So that silly error still costing them money today. All right. Another one. This is a good one. Spot the difference between these two companies. Anybody spot a difference here between these two?
Number of sons.
Number of sons, yeah. Well, it seems pretty trivial, doesn't it? But do you know what Companies House does? Based in Cardiff. Yeah, it registers all companies in the UK. All right. So what they did was they made a really simple error. One of those companies went bankrupt, and when a company goes bankrupt, Companies House must put on their website, notify people that the company's been made bankrupt. Can anybody spot the data horror in this?
Yeah. They got the wrong one.
They got the wrong Taylor and Son, yeah. So basically they confused the two companies, all right? Just an S, one letter, not very significant, eh? Now the company on the left was very profitable, and they'd been running for 100 years, and it was based here in Cardiff, all right? Family business, employed 30 odd people, really good client base, customer base. What happened, do you think, as soon as their company was shown on Companies House as being bankrupt?
Well, their clients said, we don't want to work
Yeah.
anymore.
All the people that had ordered off them all went, oh, we're cancelling our orders. Anything else? Suppliers stopped supplying them with things. Clients stopped buying off them. All the rest of it, yeah? And the outcome of all that, cut a long story short, was that Companies House had to pay Taylor and Sons £8.5 million, nearly £9 million of our money if you're a taxpayer, which you're not yet, most of you, but you will be, as it irreparably destroyed the business. The business actually did go bankrupt because of it. Okay, and all the banks as well pulled in all their loans. Everybody, this company had collapsed basically, and about 30 jobs were lost in Cardiff because of that. Made headline news. Companies House, our money, 9 million. One letter difference, 9 million quid cost. This is why data governance is important. Right, a couple more exhibits. Here's one from. It's not just about money either. Here's one from the USA, and 7,600 people were treated during that period in a wrong way because of patient identification errors. What do you think that's a euphemism for?
We shot the wrong leg off.
Yeah, you've all heard these stories. Yeah, sorry?
Your survey dates are wrong.
You what, sorry?
It says 2,100.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, good. Well spotted. That was a deliberate data error. Yeah, well spotted. Yes, that would have been a bit backwards. Yeah, it's supposed to be 2013. My dyslexia from you. Patient identification error basically means you give the wrong person the wrong treatment for the wrong patient. And you made, there's an example you quoted, is a famous one where one hospital cut off somebody's left leg instead of their right leg.
Oh, man.
Because the data was bad. All right? So people die if the data's not good. And also, in the NHS, another example from the health service, we nearly finished with these now, is 5% of all patients' records held by GPs have got errors in them, mistakes in them. And that's really bad for the patients, but it's also bad for the cost, because the NHS pays every GP 136 quid a year for every patient. A lot of them had patients who died 20 years ago who were still on their books. So they were getting paid, basically, when the NHS is short of money, the patients who had died on them. So it affects things like health as well. So it's not just sort of retail and corporate companies. Right, here's an example of some real records from an actual database. Okay, I won't tell you which company it was to protect the innocent. Can anyone spot any problems with this database? Just shout them out if you spot anything that you think, if you were looking at that, doesn't look quite right.
blank employee number.
Yeah, so the blank employee number bottom left, yeah.
Employee number has letters as well as numbers, which is a bit weird.
Yeah, the employee number there looks a bit, on the second row down, looks a bit like a national insurance number, doesn't it? Not an employee number.
No,
Anything else?
no first name.
Yeah, nil first name for Greg.
No gender.
What's the problem with gender? Oh, unknown, yes. We have an unknown gender and we have some 4 X's in one gender. Sorry? Who's that? Oh, date of birth, yeah. Which one are you looking at?
The 000.
Oh, yeah. So date of birth is all zeros, yeah. So they call it that. They were sort of born at the start of the dawn of the universe.
The TBD roll code.
Where are you looking? Sorry, roll code. Oh, yeah, sorry. TBD, which probably means what?
To be determined.
To be decided or to be determined, yeah.
No.
Anything else?
No.
Oh yeah, 999's in the roll code as well. Could be right, but the other roll codes all look sort of PM10, PM16, and they project manager.
US, some UK dates.
Yeah, that's the other one. Some are in UK date format, some are in US date format, where they put the day before the month. Yeah, which always confuses the hell out of me.
So
There's a female Brian.
And there's a female Brian as well. And maybe what he does in the weekends then, but it's fine. So if you went through them all, those are the ones that I picked out. The other one you didn't pick out was, see the 2 Brian Smiths. Do you think they're one and the same person? Or not?
They've got the same employee number.
They got the same employee number, which would
Same
it could be the same guy, yeah.
Same date of birth,
Same date of birth.
but different roll codes and different spellings.
Correct. So basically you've got Brian spelt with an I and Brian spelt with a Y. Brian is simultaneously male and female, and also he's a PM10 and a PM16. So that sort of indicates probably that's a duplicate record for that employee. Yeah? There's 2 records for one employee. Does it matter? By the way, if you add these all up, I reckon there are 13 or 19 errors in that simple little table, depending on whether Smith is a duplicate or not. Right. Okay, you've got to spot your nose. Now, you're probably thinking that was an exaggeration. Real data isn't like that, is it? This came out in September in 2017, the Harvard Business Review. And the way they did this was quite interesting. They got a load of senior people in 75 different companies to take some rows of data like that, do an eyeball of them, and highlight whenever they found an error, like those errors, yeah? Guess how many records came out of that process with no errors? None. 3%. 3 out of 100. So 97 records out of 100 in an average company, they've got errors in their data. Does it matter, do you think? Okay, why does it matter?
You make decisions based on this.
You do, don't you? Yeah, you decide whether to sell something to somebody, whether to give them health insurance or not, how much to charge them, how much to pay them. Yeah. So these things have a big impact on people. So that's worth looking. If you get a chance to read that article, if you're interested in this topic, it's really worth looking at. Okay, so when you then look at, but that's the old world, the old world of customer records and the rest of it. But we're all in the new world now. We have self-service data analytics and big data lakes, which Jason's going to talk about afterwards. I hope if he turns up, and all the rest of it. But there's some figures there as well to demonstrate how much the new data approaches and technologies are struggling with the same old problems. And here's a good example. Anybody who want to become a data scientist, really well-paid job in IT these days, probably one of the highest-paid jobs in IT. It's quite shocking if you look at the bottom left there, that if you become a data scientist, you'll spend between half your working week and nearly 90% of your working week doing nothing but sorting out problems with data before you even start to do any data science or analytics. And more and more companies are finding that it's because their data is just not fit for purpose. It's not good enough to support what they're trying to do. So these very expensive people, instead of thinking they're going to do all this great, exciting, new, whizzy stuff, are sitting there eyeballing data on spreadsheets. Not a good idea. Not good use of people's time. Right, so take those problems overall. Some of the figures, you take a budget of a big organisation. Take BT, where I used to work and where Jason was coming up, is working. We reckon about 20-25% of the budget of BT, all the money they spend, is wasted because of data problems. It's huge sums of money. Huh? And I didn't believe that. And I led a data improvement program in BT when I worked there, as Jason would tell you. And we saved 600 million quid in 2 years, just clearing up bad data like that. So, in other words, we made people accountable and responsible, and we drove through governance across BT, data governance. Yeah?
How do you put a value on it like that?
Well, because the way you do it, it's a good question. The way you do it, you don't say, how much is a good, accurate customer record worth? What you say is, what happens if a customer record is inaccurate? So what's the implication if we got duplicate employee records, for example? What does that mean for the business? Does that mean that person gets paid twice? Probably not, but it could be. If that was your payroll database, maybe that person gets paid twice. So there's a cost. If you've got duplicate records, there's costs like if you get the address of a customer wrong, say you're Amazon, look at that one on the top right. Okay, a million parcels a year can't be delivered because the address isn't good enough. Okay, that's a governance issue. Number one governance issue, many companies get addresses and email addresses right. So that basically means that there's a cost to that as well, because it's a failed delivery means the guy in the van has to take it back to the depot, it's got to be cleared up and sorted, and it's going to be sent back out again. So there's a cost in that. Yeah, so you cost it by failure. It's the cost of failure, not the cost of success. See what I mean? That's the way you measure it. Good question. So why does it matter? Whip through this, I think, no? I think you got it. If you don't govern data well, there's an economic impact. It can hit your revenues, increase your costs, and increase damage your profits. Right? Look at TalkTalk, prime example of that. Of course, there's also all these sort of cases, they damage an organisation's brand very badly. TalkTalk lost 100,000 customers because their brand was damaged. People didn't trust them anymore. And you can't say you blame them. And also their customer loyalty goes out the window. I mean, you know, I was with a company for many years who insisted on spelling my name wrongly and kept calling me Nigel all the time, which was fine on weekends. But, you know, I asked them 6 or 7 times could they put that right. Never did. And in the end, I just stopped paying them and told them. I said, no, I got enough now. I can tell you other famous people, not really famous, but famous people have done the same. Broad companies done. I'm got time now. And this is the point that was mentioned earlier as well, that if you don't get people's data right, particularly their personal data, laws and regulations exist that can clobber you in big, big ways. Does anybody know what exciting thing is going to happen on the 25th of May of this year?
Data Protection Act changes.
Sorry?
Changes data protection.
Yeah, it's called the General Data Protection Regulation is coming into force in the UK, which hugely strengthens the onus on companies to get personal data right. And if you misuse personal data, God help you, you can be fined up to 4% of your turnover if you do a fraud talk or if you send bad data to people. Okay? So it's really serious. So if you don't know about GDPR, it's worth checking up on it. There's loads of stuff out there on it. General Data Protection Regulation, and that is what that thing is all about. And of course as well, all those things are really bad for companies. I think we've established as well, if you don't govern data well, what can you do to people? It can cause annoyance, clearly. Reputational damage to an individual. That woman there, by the way, had applied for a mortgage, couldn't get one. She was in the national papers because they confused her with somebody else who was a bankrupt, and they kept refused to give her a mortgage when she was on the verge of buying a house. And because of that, she lost the house and lost a lot of money. So she got in the papers moaning about this mortgage company. Of course, death, as we've established, if you sort of give a patient the wrong medication, it can kill them, you know. And the other thing, of course, as well, is on the days of social media, if a company pisses you off, there's a very good chance you might tell all your mates as well. And that's what happened with Virgin Media. They pissed one customer off. He got really cross with them. I won't tell you why, but it was because they messed his data up. He told all his friends, who told all their friends. Within 6 days of that, him complaining to Virgin on social media, 1 million people had commented on it, saying, we think they're shit as well. We think Virgin Media are bad. And Virgin Media had massive damage because of handling one customer's data badly. So the impact of these things is like a snowball. Okay, right, so, next question. Why is data generally then so bad? You work with data, you did the 7-year database course. Why do you think data gets so badly wrong?
Store it in loads of different areas in different ways, and then you have to somehow squish them all together and it just all goes wrong.
Yeah, so basically when people develop systems and they develop databases and they develop data lakes, whatever they do, they don't think about how we're going to share this data and set some standards for it so that we can then link it with other data sources across the business or outside the business. Happens all the time. Anything else?
You need to maintain like data integrity.
Right.
And when you normalize your schema tables, scan around and I don't know, just sometimes they're too denormalized.
I know exactly what you mean, yeah. So,
Yeah,
you're holding data in duplicated ways in different parts of the same database, and then, you know, as you say, you're keeping multiple copies of data in a very disorganized
And
way.
you might get duplicates as well because of like
Correct, yeah.
What about 6 buzzwords in English?
Yeah. Oops. But it was, yeah, so basically, so IT can cause problems, okay? If you design IT badly, as you said, that can cause data to go wrong. What else can cause data to go wrong?
Just losing data.
Sorry?
Sorry, Rich.
Go on.
Just be poorly inputted.
Yeah, I mean, people make errors when they input data. Look at me. When I made the error, you well spotted 2103 and not 2013.
the main thing I saw in all of that was just no validation. There must
Yeah.
validation, right? If you've got good validation, you have to put in the correct data fields,
Yeah.
or you can't.
Exactly. What do you need to validate data effectively? What do you need to put in place?
Set guidelines.
What else specifically
You have
on
like,
a particular
do you have like
record?
this, right? You have client-side validation, and maybe
Yeah.
when you, because it's a database, you have another layer of validation, maybe you have to make sure that the data, I had this problem a weekend.
Oh.
I put in instead of putting in like a numeric
Yeah.
data type, I tried to put in a string.
Ah,
Stuff like that, and it messes up the
Yeah.
integrity of the data.
So IT can mess up. What I was trying to get, have you come across the concept of business rules? Is
So,
that business rules? Is that something you've been taught so
yeah,
far?
business logic and business rules.
Business rules. Basically, business rules are, this is where governance drives the conformance, right? When you look at it, say take that Hewlett Packard website, if they put some basic business rules in place, like if the value of this sale is more than, is less than, something's probably wrong. You don't sell a laptop for £1.58. So they put a pretty basic business rule that said that the full cost of the laptop is 2,300 quid, and therefore an acceptable range of values is probably between 1,200 quid and 2,300 quid. If there's anything else, don't put it in. Don't put it up on the website, because there's something wrong. Very simple things, right? But people don't do it. And there's lots of tools out there as well that can help them to do that very easily. So people don't do it. So there's a, sorry.
Just one more question. Could you just give us a little example of business rule? Another one.
Okay, example of
It's a
the
really ambiguous thing.
Okay, yeah, an example of the business rule, a very simple one, the date of birth one, would be if you're recording somebody's date of birth, it should be before today, it shouldn't be all nils, and it shouldn't be all nines. It's a very simple common business rule, yeah? So that whenever you manage a date field or a date attribute or a date record, you apply those rules to it. And therefore, if somebody puts in all nines, then that entry is somehow rejected or flagged up to somebody who's responsible for it. Say, this doesn't make sense, you can't have... and I worked at an American company in New York last year, and they had lots of records of customers with birth dates of all nils or all nines. Which, when you think about the insurance company, is pretty significant. Because you sort of need to know how old somebody is, and you need to know when they were first insured and all the rest of it. And they had hundreds, literally hundreds of records on it. So lots and lots of different business rules. You can create your own, and you can use tools to do it that will do it automatically for you. Okay, so why does data go wrong? How are we doing for time? Oh, nearly there. So I think basically this is the number one reason, hence why you need governance of data and governance of anything. Because if nobody's made responsible for data, then surprise, surprise, it never gets fixed properly. What do you think people do when data goes wrong in companies where there is no proper responsibility or accountability for data?
Blame someone else.
They either ignore it. Well, I've seen that happen time and time again. I was working with First Great Western Railways a couple of years ago, and this is on video, they'll be careful. I sat with them in the contact centre in Plymouth where they take customer calls, and it was quite obvious when they took some of the calls that the people who worked at that contact centre didn't really care whether they got the data right or not. They were just moving on to the next call as quickly as they could. And when I said to them, you just typed that in, that was wrong. No, that's not my problem. Off it went. It's not a problem for them, but it becomes a problem later. I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. So that's one of the key issues. And it's the same with all governance, right? Which is why you need governance. If we don't make people responsible for something, nobody's responsible for it, and therefore it becomes a mess. And unfortunately, many organisations I've been in, that is the norm and not the exception. Not all, but that is the norm and not the exception. So, you know, basically, it's not my problem. What? Why is it my problem? Bury my head in the sand, not my problem. And that is too common. The other thing I think, reason data goes wrong, and I can have a bit of a go at all you techies here. Can you read the caption of that? Yes, it was the guy who says, what does IT stand for? And at the bottom, the guy said, well, we have lots of information technology, we just don't have any information. And what happens a lot of occasions that I've seen, that when the data problems in an IT system, rather than fix the data, guess what they do? They buy new technology, they port all the data from the old system into the new technology, and everyone guess what happens?
It's just the same.
Yeah, well, no, it's actually different because it now goes wrong twice as fast as it did before. So that's really a step forward. And I've seen that happen time and time again. Our database in let's buy a new one, let's port all the data across, and then we'll fix it. And they never do. All right? I promise you, they never do. So that's too much focus on the technology in IT and not enough about managing the data, the information that it's really all about.
How would they fix the data? Would they have to get like an or would they pay somebody just to
Right.
do each record?
I will come to that after. I've got a slide at the end to say how do you start to fix these problems, because in this session I don't have a lot. The other big issue here, of course, has already been mentioned. In my experience, I've looked at lots of data problems, and I've never yet come across a data problem that was just down to technology. All right? There's some people reasons why data goes wrong that have been mentioned already, right? People make errors. People aren't trained properly when they enter the data. The other one is internal politics as well. I've been in companies where somebody will say, well, this is my database and nobody's having access to it. So when other people want to create the same data, instead of accessing that source of data, what do they go and do then? They create another one. And then it parallels and duplicates the first data source, and then you get multiple data sources all over the company. When I worked for BT, anyone want to guess how many BT systems held customer data? Jason's always guessed what to say. Any ideas? How many do you think a company like BT?
50?
50? Keep going.
How many was it?
How many of BT systems held customer data? Data on you and me. Yeah? No idea. 6,200 systems. So when you've got data in 6,200 systems on each of us, how do you think you're going to get that all to come together? Pretty much impossible. All right, so that's a key reason why data's gone so horribly wrong. Is people, when they develop applications, they just create their own data sources instead of accessing data that already exists. And then they set their own rules for it, they give it its own name, and then you can't join it up again when you need to. So it's, process errors, very common reason for data failures. If you've got a badly designed process, then I guarantee you it'll produce bad data. Because as somebody said there, the process for HP was bad because nobody vetted or checked the prices before they hit the website. Bad idea when you're online retailing. And yes, you get technology errors as well. The most common one I've seen is when you move data from one system to another, the field may be truncated. Then you might chop a bit off because you don't design the field properly for it. And that can happen too. And then what makes it even worse is that these causes, they also come together like that. So they all interact with each other. So people get things wrong, the processes are bad, the technology doesn't work, and it all goes round in a vicious circle, and everything gets worse and worse and worse. So, and this is why it's hard, all right? Where's Jason walking? This is why these things are tough. Most companies are organised like that, aren't they? You've got a sales department, a dispatch department, a finance department. What's the problem with data when you think of an organisation like that in those departments?
You duplicate it 4 times.
Yeah? What happens to data in that company? Yeah, basically what happens is data cuts across. So sales take a customer order, yeah, it goes into the operations database to support and maintain it in the future. It gets sent to be dispatched, and then the customer's billed. So somehow that data has to flow there, same with product data, same with finance data, same with employee data. Cuts right across the organisation. But most companies don't think like that, they think in those silos. Yeah, I'm in finance, I'm in sales. So to change an organisation to be more data driven, you've got to make them think across the company like that, in a data perspective, rather than down their vertical silos. And another problem, which is all very familiar from my time in BT, I'm sure Jason will endorse this, is that when you find data problems, the people who create them are very rarely the people that feel the effects of them. So, good example being there from my old days in BT, somebody at a contact centre took a broadband order, got the address wrong. Guess who suffered most? when that address was wrong? Was it the person who took the order? No. Where do you think the problems were?
The customer.
The customer, why?
Because they don't have their address.
Yeah, basically, I mean, if they put the address of the customer in wrong, they'd send an engineer to an address that didn't exist. So the guy in the van, or the girl in the van, used to go around. So they wasted their time, and at the same time, there's a customer taking half a day off work to get broadband installed and nobody turns up. Bad. Okay? Bad for the company, bad for the individual, bad for the guy in the van, bad for everybody. So that's one of the problems. Right, so how do you begin to fix it? Coming to the end. If you've got effective data governance in any decent company, because it depends what they do with it. If they're paying people and there's duplicate records and they pay them twice, somebody in finance should be a bit worried about that. You would have thought, wouldn't you? But you don't know.
There is, like you said, a lot of data gets inputted, like you said, at the sort of start of the, you said cross-code, right? Because you're all these parts. I used to work for a game, and we used to do a lot of little different schemes and tricks to try and hit our targets for the day.
Oh yeah.
So,
Everybody does that.
in order to hit your target for the day, we would chuck in some loyalty cards and sign up for anonymous people who don't exist. And
Yeah, we've seen that.
and during the whole, like, when you were telling me you would put, I'm a victim of this, you put in like phone numbers and you put in like 99999
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Well, that's one of the reasons.